Try to remember the earliest moment of your life. Go on. Close your eyes for a second and reach for it. Most people land on a birthday party, a fall off a bike, maybe a hospital room. But here's the strange part. Almost none of those memories happen before age 3. And the real answer for why is far stranger than simple forgetting. You were not unconscious during those years. You were not absent from your own life. Your eyes were open, your brain was firing, and you were learning faster than you ever will again. So where did it all go? Scientists have a name for this gap. They call it infantile amnesia, a term first used over a century ago by Sigmund Freud. Freud noticed that adults could recall almost nothing from their first few years, despite those years being packed with formative experience. He guessed it was repression, a kind of psychological burial. He was wrong about the mechanism, but he was right that something deliberate was happening. Here is the reframe. Your brain was not failing to store those years. It was building the very system that would later be needed to find them again. Think of it less like a flood that washed memories away, and more like a library being constructed around books that were already shelved before the shelves existed. To understand this, you have to understand what a memory actually requires. Not just an experience, not just a brain. A memory needs an index. It needs a sense of, this happened to me at this time in this place. Psychologists call this autobiographical memory, and it depends on a part of your brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is your internal librarian. It does not store memories itself so much as tag them, timestamp them, and file them so your cortex can retrieve them later. And here's the twist. In a toddler, that librarian is still being hired. Patricia Bauer, a developmental psychologist at Emory University, has spent decades studying exactly this window. Her research shows that the hippocampus continues maturing well into childhood, with key structures still developing new neurons and refining their connections years after birth. A toddler can absolutely form a memory. What a toddler cannot yet do is bind that memory into a stable, retrievable narrative with a self attached to it. That is the counterintuitive part. The memories were not necessarily destroyed. The system needed to retrieve them simply was not finished being built. Proof of this comes from an unexpected place. In the 1980s, researcher Carolyn Rovee-Collier ran experiments with infants as young as 3 months old. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile overhead. The baby learned that kicking made the mobile move. Weeks later, with no reminder, the same baby started kicking the moment they saw that mobile again. The memory had survived. It just had no language, no sense of self, and no narrative thread connecting it to anything else. It was a memory without a story. So why does the story matter so much? Because a story is how your brain decides what to keep. Around age 3 or 4, something changes. You begin developing what psychologists call a cognitive self, an internal sense of me that persists through time. And once that self exists, your brain finally has something to hang memories on. Carole Peterson, a memory researcher at Memorial University of Newfoundland, ran a remarkable long-term study to track exactly how this plays out. She interviewed young children about their earliest memories, then came back years later and asked them again. What she found was unsettling. Many memories did not just fade. They transformed. Children misremembered key details, sometimes confidently inventing scenes that never happened, while losing details that had. The memory was not a fixed recording being slowly erased. It was a living reconstruction, rewritten every time it was accessed. Does that unsettle you a little? It should, because it means something most people never consider. Even your adult memories are not playback footage. They are reconstructions, rebuilt fresh each time you remember them, shaped by who you are right now. This is where the deep dive turns towards something even stranger. If memory is reconstruction rather than replay, then the earliest years of your life were not erased so much as never given a stable enough self to file them under. You were there. You were learning. You were forming attachments, fears, and preferences that quietly shaped the adult you became. But the index card with your name on it had not been printed yet. This explains a pattern that researchers see across cultures. Children in language-rich, narrative-heavy households tend to retain slightly earlier memories than children in environments with less conversational reflection. Elaborate Western parents who narrate the day back to their toddlers, asking, "What did we do at the park today?" are essentially helping build the indexing system faster. Memory, it turns out, is partly a social skill. You learn to remember partly because someone else teaches you how to talk about what happened. Here is the twist within the twist. This means your earliest memories were not just stored by you, they were co-authored. A parent's bedtime recap, a sibling's retelling of a family trip, even a photograph held up years later with the words, "Remember this," can quietly graft a memory into your mind that you did not generate on your own. Some studies on false memory, most famously the work of Elizabeth Loftus, show just how easily a vivid, detailed memory can be implanted in someone who never experienced the original event at all. If memory can be planted that easily in adults, imagine how porous the process was when your sense of self was still half-built. So when you say, "I don't remember being 2," what you are really saying is something closer to, "The version of me that existed then was not yet equipped to file anything under my name." The events happened, the brain that experienced them learned from them, but the narrator had not been born yet. And maybe that is the part worth sitting with. You spend your whole life assuming memory is a vault, something you either have access to or you do not. But it was never a vault. It was always a construction project, one that started before you could speak, continued while you learned to tell stories about yourself, and is still, even now, quietly editing itself every time you reach into the past. Think about the last time you told a story about your childhood at a dinner table. Did you notice how smooth it sounded, how complete? That smoothness is not because your brain kept perfect records. It is because your brain is extraordinarily good at building a convincing narrative out of fragments, filling gaps with plausible details, and presenting the whole thing to you as if it were always there. This is not a flaw. It is the same system, the same hippocampal machinery first studied in toddlers, still running in you today, decades later. Every time you remember anything, you are doing what your 2-year-old self could not yet do. Tagging an experience with a me, a when, and a where, then filing it where you can find it again. The difference is that now the filing system works. Back then it was still being installed. So try again. Reach for that earliest memory. Notice how confident it feels, how solid, how much like a photograph. Now remember that it is not a photograph at all. It is a story your fully built self quietly assembled out of fragments left behind by a self that did not yet know how to keep score. The years before 3 were never erased. They were simply lived by someone who had not yet learned how to remember.